So the big news today is that Robin Williams is dead, the famous comedian and actor. And apparently his death was by suicide, by asphyxiation, which I assume means that he hung himself. But the reason for the suicide, or at least what the early news reports are insinuating, is that he's been struggling with addictions issues, and lately that struggle has increased. I mean, he's been struggling with addictions, I think, his whole life. But I guess recently alcohol has become a really big problem for him. I don't know if drugs have been involved recently as well, but he entered some kind of a rehab program and it wasn't working for him. And anyway, it's come to this. He's killed himself and he leaves behind his wife and 3 kids. And actually, the timing of this event is very synchronous with my thinking, because for the last couple of weeks at least, I've been really focused on thinking about and trying to understand addictions. And actually, I attempted to make a video a couple of days ago about my thoughts, and then even this morning, as I was walking around the coulees, I attempted to make another one. I wasn't happy with either video, so I didn't hang on to them. But I have been really trying to get a better grasp, a better understanding of it myself, and I think I might maybe in the winter semester even attempt to teach a anthropology of addictions course at the college, just so I can do a thorough review of that literature. And because addictions are a really big issue all around, but in my community for sure. And I don't really like the word addiction, because or the concept addiction, because it seems to be very, very medicalized and personal. And even in this case with Robin Williams, what you see is that he was trying to deal with his addiction at that personal level. And this is what Western society teaches us, is that someone who is an addict, they have a medical problem, and one that is both physiological and mental. They make that distinction, even though the mental is certainly physiological as well. But yeah, you are responsible in Western society to try to break out of your addiction, and basically the premise is that somebody with a weak will is going to be more likely to remain addicted, or even to become addicted. That a strong person shouldn't have to worry about. A strong-minded person should not become addicted to begin with. And this is part of the medicalizing of it. And so when it comes to dealing with it, when it comes to how do I break out of this, then it's also a personal endeavor. And then so you take on some kind of rehab program, perhaps, or something like that, like this Robin Williams did. But there have been studies out there. I'm thinking specifically of the studies they call the Rat Park studies, that were conducted by Dr. Bruce Alexander, psychologist Bruce Alexander, out of Simon Fraser University in British Columbia, late 1970s, early 80s. And in his studies, what he showed was that basically, if you take these laboratory rats and you have them in their small confined cages, and they're separated from the others, and they just have to live alone in this little tiny cage without very much stimulus, and in that situation they will very easily and readily become hooked on opiates, so much so that they will sometimes starve themselves to death because all they want to do is take the opiates, take the morphine or what have you. And so, you know, you've seen these kind of studies where the rat will just hang out at the where they're getting their drip of morphine or what have you, and just keep hitting the lever or keep doing what they need to do to get drugged up. But what he did was he created this like 100 square foot high stimulus area that he called Rat Park, that had lots of tunnels and things they could play with, and exercise wheels, and, you know, all kind of like nooks and crannies and stuff. Made a really interesting high stimulus 100 square foot area, put a bunch of rats in there together, and then tried to get them addicted to opiates, and they wouldn't do it. They weren't interested in getting high. And then he started doing things like taking addicted rats that were already, you know, made addicted in the small cages, putting them into this rat park world, and they would put themselves through a rehab. I mean, they would stop taking their drugs, even though it was being offered. They would quit by themselves, and, you know, it was kind of dispelling the myth that the reason that addicts don't come off of their, you know, addictions is because the what do you call it? When your body physiologically freaks out because you're not giving it that substance anymore. The DTs, the detox is too rough. That's, you know, that's something that's been that's a very familiar part of the discourse, that, you know, the detox stage is just so tough that that, you know, people will relent and go back into using the substance. But in the rat park, that didn't happen. The rats went through the DTs and were happy to do so in this new environment. They didn't want that drug. And then he did things where he like tried to entice them by making the water with the drug in it, you know, very sweet, something that they would be, you know, that they would really want to drink because it tastes very good. And even then, he couldn't get them using it. So what this suggested really is that the addictions tend to be connected with our relationship with society and place, and with the you know, whether or not we are being properly stimulated socially and geographically, and all of this kind of a thing. And, you know, it makes you think that, you know, really we can't keep medicalizing addictions as an individual problem, that you know, we can't keep blaming these people for being weak-willed or what have you, and expecting that treatment programs are going to treatment programs focused on the individual are going to help our society have less addicts. The reason that we have so many addicts may very well be because something in our culture, in our cultural environment that we have set up, has brought us into lives that are not happy lives for us. We're like the rats in the little cages, and somehow we need to figure out how to create the rat park for ourselves. And, you know, probably a lot of that has to do with our disconnection from nature. I mean, that's what I would suspect right away, is that because we have removed ourselves from the high stimulus of being completely immersed and engaged with nature, which is very diverse, and it takes a lifetime to, I mean, there's so much to learn, and we've put ourselves in these little, these little boxes, these little neighborhoods, and kick nature out and cut down on the diversity, and we do monocropping, and we've tried to simplify our world, and I think in a way it's hurting us. And there may be a lot of other things. I mean, we certainly reflect those lab rats in the way that we have isolated ourselves from other beings. I mean, I have neighbors living all around me, but I don't know them, I don't visit them, I don't talk to them, I don't have anything to do with them. And we're living like so close together, within a couple of paces between the walls, and but yet we're isolated in our own little environment, and we're very egocentric. We've lost that sociocentric aspect of our we are social beings as part of our genetic inheritance, but we have kind of shut that off in our culture and become very disconnected from one another, very disconnected from nature. And this is likely causing the scenario where you have a lot of addicts, because people are unhappy. I mean, I have had my experiences with addictions. I smoked for 20 years. I was able to break out of that, and it was mostly through adopting a different kind of lifestyle. I wanted to be healthy. I wanted to start working on becoming a more complete human being, and part of the health aspect of it, the ability to be able to do things with my body, required that I quit smoking. So I did, and mentally I just told myself I'm not going to be a smoker anymore. So it's not like it's impossible for an individual to muster up some kind of inner dialogue that allows them to break out of the addiction. But I've had other circumstances where, for instance, when I was in the U.S. military, I was very, very unhappy. I felt like a prisoner because I had been duped. I had been lied to about what the identity and purpose of the U.S. military was. I thought I was going in to become a soldier to try to assist oppressed people around the world. And what I found out, in fact, was that I joined the organization that is the biggest oppressor, and it really disillusioned me, and I was trapped. I was trapped in a contract with the federal government that required that I stay where I was and for a certain number of years and continue working for them, and I hated it. And I became depressed, and I started drinking. So much that I think I nearly gave myself alcohol poisoning on several occasions. At least a couple of times I was written up and reprimanded for coming to work drunk. And I had people that didn't really like me, but at the same time, saw me as a human being and wanted to help me. I had people that were expressing concerns and saying, man, you got to knock it off. You're killing yourself. And maybe Robin Williams has been trying to kill himself for a long time. He's just been doing it really slowly. The day that I got out of the Army, I quit drinking. It was like a switch was flipped. And that's much like these rats being put in the rat park. Suddenly my life situation had changed, and I had no urge to drink anymore. Went to university and picked up another addiction maybe a couple of years later, and that was smoking weed. And I smoked weed, I just started slow, but before long I was doing it every day. And right from morning to going to bed, I would be high. I'd smoke a few joints a day, maybe, just space them out throughout the day. And yeah, I was really stoned for a couple of years. And then I met my wife and dropped all of my life, in Boston, where I'd been going to school, I graduated already, and I just up and left it all, and went to go have a new life with my wife. And so it was easy to, again, just like flipping a switch. I didn't need that stuff anymore. What it was, I think, was I was unhappy with my circumstances in Boston. With I was in a relationship there, and I think I was just very unhappy with it, and I was drinking all the time. Um, the last few years, or not drinking all the time, but smoking weed. Last few years, I've been, pretty heavily drinking as well, and I think when I look at the origins of that, I think there's two things going on in my life. One is that, I feel like I'm in a bad circumstance because I can't own my own house. Nobody will give me a mortgage, so I can't own my own house, and so I constantly feel as though, I'm under somebody else's rule. I have pets that I love I'm worried about. I'm always worried about getting kicked out of here because of the animals that we keep and the way that we keep them. And a lot of people don't understand the way that I am with my animals. And so that puts me in a high kind of stress all the time, knowing that I could get kicked out, or that I'm going to have to pay, when I do leave, I'm going to have to pay some significant damage fees, and that I might not be able to find another landlord who will rent to me because of the pets that I own, or this kind of a thing. Also, I think my parents getting divorced really shook me up, and that's kind of when I started drinking again, and I haven't completely stopped, to this day. And but I recognize that there's something, there's probably something that's behind that, some of this uncomfortable living situation. When you look at really impoverished communities, you see high levels of addiction there. Why? Again, because it's a very unhealthy state of living. And so it's not surprising, and it's like the little rats in the cage. Now, in truth, somebody can look down on somebody that has an addiction or what have you, but I think in truth, addictions are rampant in this culture. And when I talk about addictions, what I'm talking about is doing something, undertaking some kind of behavior that is going to have a negative consequence. Negative health consequence, negative social consequence, negative spiritual consequence. It's going to have a negative consequence, and yet you go ahead and do it anyway. Why would we do that? That's the part that's the real mystery that I want to that I'm thinking about and trying to wrap my head around. Why do that? Why undertake a behavior like that when it's going to have negative consequences? And we do this at individual levels, but we also do it at the levels of collectives. We even at such large collectives as the global human culture, the kind of universal industrial culture that we've created, that we have spread all over this world. In a sense, a lot of the things that those industries do have negative consequences, and we know it. We know, for instance, that we're through those industries we're causing the climate to change, and it might end up wiping out human existence. I mean, it's that extreme. We are literally killing ourselves in the slow way, just like an addict, and we're doing that as a collective. And so how do we expect individuals in this culture, in this cultural environment, to behave so radically different from the collective if the collective is undertaking action that has that addictive quality that is harmful? Then how do we expect individuals to undertake action that is only going to be beneficial? It's impossible, because we're all engaged in this culture, and this culture itself is poison. But why? Why are we doing this? It might be that we caught ourselves in the culture itself has become like this self-perpetuating thing, feeding addiction, where we're depressed because of the cultural environment, and so that drives us toward addiction, and those addictions make things even worse, which drives us further and further in. And so it's very unfortunate. I don't know what the answer is, but I think there is some hope in terms of education and bringing that focus away from the individual, and not medicalizing it, and not acting like addiction is this weird thing that only people who have problems with their willpower or what have you get into, because we're all part of this addictive culture, and we're all engaged in doing things that hurt us. If somebody eats a donut, candy bar, they know, if they're adults of this culture, they know that's not healthy, and yet they undertake it. I mean, it's rampant. So, very unfortunate that Robin Williams decided to speed up the process. And I don't know why someone would do that. I can't wrap my head around killing myself over being addicted. I could maybe identify with the kind of a pull to harm yourself for if there's certain social reasons or what have you, where you don't want to keep going on living if you have to live under certain conditions socially. Maybe that's where he was at. I don't know. I really can't imagine killing myself. I love myself too much for that. But I hope that this isn't treated like every other famous person that kills themselves and has addiction problems, and it probably will be, which would be so sad for this person, and too bad they were they had these addictions problems. That's what caused it's their problems. It's not society's problems, and that's the issue that I hope some kind of enlightenment will happen, where we'll come to terms with the fact that we're not living in Rat Park here. We're living in the little isolated cages, and it's not surprising that we have people with addictions problems, lots of them, everyone, some way or another, hurting ourselves, and it's not necessary, but we're doing it. I don't know if we've always done it. I don't know if this is just part of the human condition, or if this is something specific to our time and era. I suspect that even if it is just, even if it is part of the human condition in general, that that it is especially, that the phenomena has grown in this era to become, very disproportioned compared to what it might have once been. Because certainly we're living in a time with a lot of oppressive conditions to the human spirit. Just an additional thought that I'm going to tag on to the end of the Robin Williams video, but when you consider it, what his profession was, it goes right along with his addictions and with his suicide, perhaps. You know, comedians often are using the laughter to point out, to indicate things that are, you know, really messed up in our society. They may be like hyper alert, hyper aware of the kind of problems in our cultural world that make people very unhappy, that have us in these disconnected, isolated conditions. And you know, looking at Robin Williams and the kind of the way that he would shift between comedy and doing, you know, some very serious work, and even things like you know, shows that he did like Patch Adams and stuff, you know, or the Dead Poets Society, and the way he participated in these projects that used comedy, but at the same time were showing real issues with our society. You know, that was a big part of his life, and so, you know, he may have been a very sad guy, and that his happiness or his laughter, his humor, may have been really a betrayal of that inner sadness. And you know, Robin Williams is not unlike any of us, I don't think, in that respect, but he's just took that sadness too far today.